My name is Eleanor Vance, I'm 29, and 6 years ago, my own mother stole my fiancé for my sister. Before I tell you how I stood on stage and publicly dismantled the life they built on my ruins, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The air in the grand hall of the Drake Hotel crackled with the low hum of 1,000 quiet conversations. It was the annual Chicago Foundation Charity Ball, the biggest night of the year, and I was its host. From my position near the stage, I could see them the moment they walked in. My mother, poised and hungry-eyed, in a navy gown that was just a little too severe. My sister, Genevieve, clinging to the arm of the man who was supposed to have been my husband, Theodore. They moved with an unearned confidence, scanning the room for important people, for anyone who could elevate them. Then, Genevieve's eyes found the main stage, and the oversized banner hanging above it. It read, An Evening of Hope, hosted by Vance Designs and Garrett Sterling. I watched her smile falter. I saw her elbow my mother, her painted lips forming my name. My mother's head snapped up. Her face, for a split second, was a mask of pure, unfiltered shock. And Theodore, he just froze. He looked from the banner, to the man standing beside me, my husband, Garrett, and then directly at me. The smug satisfaction on his face melted away, replaced by something I hadn't seen in 6 long years, utter disbelief. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. But before I tell you what I said to them, before the final chess piece was moved and the game was won, you need to understand the board. You need to know how it all began. Let me take you back 6 years, to a small apartment in Lincoln Park, where I still believed that love and hard work were enough. I was 23, and my world was filled with fabric swatches and paint chips. I was an interior designer, just starting out, pouring every dime I had and every ounce of my energy into my little one-woman business. My life wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. And at the center of it was Theodore. We were engaged, planning a small wedding, saving up for a down payment. He was my rock, or so I thought. My family, on the other hand, was a different story. My mother lived for my older sister, Genevieve. Genevieve worked in finance. She had the high salary, the downtown condo, the clear path to a promotion. I had a passion, which in my mother's eyes, was just a nice word for a hobby that didn't pay well. I remember one Sunday dinner like it was yesterday. It was just the 4 of us at my parents' house. Genevieve was going on about a huge bonus she was getting. "That's my girl," my mother said, beaming. "Always reaching for the top." She turned to me, her smile tightening. "Eleanor, you sold another sofa this week?" "I landed a new client, Mom. A whole house renovation." "That's nice, dear," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Just make sure you're saving for your retirement." Then she looked at Theodore. "You're a patient man, Theo. It takes a strong man to support a woman with artistic dreams." It felt like a slap. Theodore just shifted in his seat and said nothing. That was the background noise of my life. The constant, quiet hum of disapproval. But I ignored it, because I had Theodore, and I had my work. And soon, I had a real shot. A huge one. A boutique hotel was opening in the Gold Coast, and they were looking for a fresh, new designer for their lobby and lounge. It was the kind of project that could change everything. A real career launcher. Getting it would mean a massive boost to my reputation, not to mention the salary that came with it. I worked for 3 straight weeks on the proposal, barely sleeping, pouring my entire soul onto every page. I presented it to the board, my hands shaking, my voice steady. They loved it. They told me I was their top choice, that my vision was exactly what they wanted. They said they just needed to finalize things with the owner and their lawyer, and they'd call me by the end of the week. That Friday, I sat in my tiny home office, staring at my phone, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the moment everything would change. I could almost taste it. The respect. The financial freedom. The ability to finally look my mother in the eye and know she couldn't diminish me anymore. At exactly 4:55 p.m., the phone rang. It was the hotel's project manager. I picked it up, a huge smile already spreading across my face. "Eleanor Vance speaking," I said, my voice bright with anticipation. There was a pause on the other end. It was just a second too long. "Eleanor," he said, and his voice was flat, professional. "I'm sorry. I'm calling to let you know that we've decided to go in a different direction with the project." My world collapsed into the receiver of my phone. The words "different direction" echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my apartment. I mumbled a thank you, hung up, and just stared at the wall. It felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All that work, all that hope, gone. I called Theodore, my voice cracking, and told him the news. "Oh, honey, that's tough," he said. He sounded distracted, like he was checking emails. "Well, you win some, you lose some. We'll go out for dinner this weekend, okay?" There was no "we'll figure it out," no "they were fools to pass on you." Just a casual dismissal. It was the first time I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach when I spoke to him. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was being too sensitive, that he was just busy. I buried myself in smaller projects, trying to rebuild the confidence that had been shattered. But the cracks were starting to show, not just in my career, but everywhere. A few weeks later, I managed to land a much smaller, but still respectable, project, designing a new boutique cafe in Wicker Park. It wasn't the hotel, but it was a paying gig with creative freedom. I was excited. I told my family about it at our next Sunday dinner. "A little coffee shop?" "How cute," my mother said, not even looking up from her plate. Genevieve smirked. "Are you sure that's a good use of your time, Ellie?" "I just got put on the advisory team for a new corporate merger. The commission from that alone could be a down payment on a house." "That's great, Jen," I said, forcing a smile. "But this is a great portfolio piece for me." My mother sighed, a theatrical, long-suffering sound. She patted Theodore's arm. "You see what I mean, Theo? Ambition. Genevieve has it. She understands that to get ahead, you can't be playing with color palettes for coffee shops. You need to be in the real game." Theodore just gave that same tight, unreadable smile. He didn't defend me. He never did. The cafe project moved forward. I created a design I was immensely proud of, a mix of industrial chic with warm, reclaimed wood. The owner, a man named Mr. Harrison, was thrilled. We were 2 days away from signing the final contract. My deposit was waiting. This felt like a real second chance. Then, I got an email. Not a call. An email. Subject: Update on the Wicker Park project. Eleanor. Thank you again for your incredible work and vision. However, after some further consideration and advice from a trusted source, we've decided to partner with a more established firm that has a broader portfolio in commercial hospitality. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. A more established firm. A trusted source. My blood ran cold. It didn't make sense. Mr. Harrison had been so enthusiastic. I called him, but he didn't pick up. I left a message, my voice sounding desperate even to my own ears. He never called back. I was devastated. It felt like a curse. I told Theodore that night, tears streaming down my face. "I don't understand what I'm doing wrong," I sobbed. "It's like someone is working against me." He put his arm around me, but it felt hollow. "Hey, don't worry," he said, his eyes on the TV. "Maybe Mom's right. Maybe this design thing is just too competitive. There's no shame in getting a stable job, you know. A regular salary. Benefits." His words didn't feel like comfort. They felt like a verdict. Like he'd already given up on me. That night, lying in bed next to him, I stared at the ceiling and felt a chasm opening between us. He wasn't my partner in my dreams anymore. He was just an audience member, waiting for the show to fail. I felt utterly and completely alone. I thought that was the worst feeling in the world. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. The weeks that followed were cold. Theodore was physically there, but it felt like I was living with a polite stranger. He stayed late at the office, was always on his phone, and our conversations were reduced to logistics. Did you pick up the dry cleaning? What do you want for dinner? The easy intimacy we'd shared was gone, replaced by a tense, brittle silence. I tried to talk to him about it, but he would just shut down, saying I was being dramatic, that he was just stressed from work. My anxiety was a constant, buzzing thing under my skin. I felt like I was losing my mind, second-guessing every interaction, every word. Was I just imagining it? Was I the one pushing him away? Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything. I'd had a meeting with a potential client that ended early. It was only 7 p.m. I decided to surprise my parents, maybe have a quick dinner with them. I pulled up to their quiet suburban street and saw Genevieve's sleek black BMW in the driveway. It wasn't unusual for her to be there. What was unusual was the car parked behind hers. Theodore's silver Lexus. A wave of nausea washed over me. He told me he was stuck at the office, working on a huge deadline. He'd be home late. Why was he here? Why hadn't he told me? I parked across the street, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't know what to do. Ringing the doorbell felt like walking into an ambush. So I just sat there, my heart hammering against my ribs. After a few minutes, I got out of my car. I crept up the driveway, staying in the shadows of the big oak tree on their lawn. The living room window was slightly ajar to let in the cool evening air. And I could hear them. Their voices were clear. My mother's sharp, commanding tone. Genevieve's smooth, self-satisfied one. And Theodore's. She's just not realistic, Theo, my mother was saying. She's playing house with her little drawings while the real world is passing her by. You need a wife who is an asset, not a liability. Mom's right, Genevieve chimed in. Her voice was like honey laced with poison. Look at us. I'm on track for a partnership. You're killing it in sales. Together, we could be a real power couple. We could buy a house in Kenilworth by next year. Can you imagine that with Eleanor? You'd be paying for her health insurance for the rest of your life. I pressed my hand to my mouth, stifling a sob. I waited, praying, begging for Theodore to defend me. To tell them they were wrong. Instead, I heard him sigh. A heavy, weary sound. I know, he said. His voice was quiet, but firm. Resigned. It's just. I've been with her a long time. It's hard. Is it harder than missing out on the life you deserve? My mother pressed. Genevieve can give you the life my daughter never could. She'll get you into the right clubs, introduce you to the right people. Eleanor will get you a discount on throw pillows. There was a short laugh. It was Theodore's. And it shattered what was left of my heart. She just doesn't have the drive, he said, his voice gaining confidence. I see it now. I need a partner, not a project. I can't build a future on passion. That was it. I didn't need to hear any more. Every word was a nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. I backed away from the window, stumbling in the dark, my body numb. I got in my car and drove home on autopilot, the tears blurring the streetlights into long, watery streaks. When he walked through the door 2 hours later, he had a half-hearted apology ready. Hey, sorry I'm so late. The meeting ran forever. I was sitting on the sofa in the dark. I didn't get up. I just looked at him. How was dinner at my parents' house? I asked. The color drained from his face. He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing to say. I heard you, I said, my voice eerily calm. I heard all of it. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't beg him to explain. Something inside me had broken, and in its place was a cold, quiet clarity. He had made his choice. They had all made their choice. Now, I would make mine. I stood up. Get your things, I said. And get out. He left within the hour. As the front door clicked shut, the silence in that apartment was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of my life breaking in two. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting the number 1 below. It lets me know you've given me a like, and that you're here with me on this journey. Your support is a bigger encouragement than you can imagine. Just comment the number 1, and let me tell you what I did next. For 2 days, I didn't move. I sat in that silent apartment, the ghost of my old life still hanging in the air. The phone rang constantly. My mother. Genevieve. They left frantic, fate-concerned voicemails. Eleanor, where are you? We're so worried. Theodore told us you had a fight. They were laying the groundwork for their story, painting me as the unstable one who ran off. On the 3rd day, something shifted. The grief didn't disappear, but it crystallized into something else. Something hard and sharp. A decision. I wasn't going to be their victim. I wasn't going to be a footnote in the story of their glorious life together. I was going to disappear. And so began the vanishing. It was a cold, methodical process. I went to the bank and withdrew most of my savings in cash. I called my landlord, paid a penalty to break my lease, and told him I was moving out at the end of the week. I sold my furniture online for pennies on the dollar. I packed my entire life, my clothes, my design books, my portfolio, into my beat-up Honda Civic. The hardest part was the phone. It was my only connection to everyone I had ever known. I looked at the long list of missed calls. Not a single one was from Theodore. He had moved on. So would I. I walked to a trash can on the corner of my street, turned the phone off, and dropped it inside. It felt final. It felt like freedom. I drove west, with no destination in mind other than away. I ended up in Denver, Colorado. It felt like a different planet from Chicago. The mountains seemed to stand guard, promising a new start. I found a tiny, cheap apartment and started the slow, grueling process of rebuilding. For the first year, my life was a blur of 80-hour work weeks. I took any job I could get. Designing a dentist's waiting room. Choosing paint colors for a suburban basement. I worked out of a corner of my studio apartment, surviving on coffee and sheer, stubborn will. It was lonely, exhausting work. There were nights I'd collapse into bed, the ache of my betrayal so sharp it felt like a physical wound. But every morning, I got up and I worked. I was laying a new foundation, one brick at a time. About 18 months after I left Chicago, I was at a bookstore, flipping through the latest issue of a national design magazine. And then I saw it. A 2-page spread. Genevieve Vance and Theodore Sterling redefine modern luxury. Sterling. He had changed his name. They were married. The article was about a regional design award they'd won for the lobby of a new boutique hotel in Chicago. My breath caught in my throat. I looked closer at the photos. The soaring ceilings, the dramatic lighting, the custom-built reception desk made of polished concrete and warm walnut. The layout, the flow, the core concept, it was all intimately familiar. I felt a sickening wave of déjà vu. I rushed home, my heart pounding. I dug through an old box in my closet until I found it, my old sketchbook. The one I'd filled with ideas when I was still engaged to Theodore, the one I'd left behind in my haste to escape. I flipped through the pages, my hands trembling. And there it was. Page after page of detailed drawings. The reception desk. The lighting fixtures. The exact spatial layout. It was my design. The one I had poured my soul into for the hotel project I never got. They hadn't just stolen my life. They had stolen my work, my art, my very ideas, and were building their success on top of them. I closed the sketchbook. The grief I'd been carrying for so long finally burned away, and what was left was pure, cold, white-hot rage. It was a fire that didn't consume me. It forged me. I stood up and looked at my reflection in the dark window. They thought they had buried me. They had no idea they had planted a seed. My goal was no longer just to survive. It was to build an empire so vast and so powerful that one day, they would be standing on the outside, looking in, and they would know, without a shadow of a doubt, that I was the one who had built the walls. The rage became my fuel. From that day forward, I stopped thinking like a struggling artist and started thinking like a CEO. I wasn't just Eleanor anymore. I was Vance Designs. I took the small profits I'd made and invested them back into the business. I built a professional website. I hired a freelance marketing consultant. I stopped taking basement renovation jobs and started strategically targeting high-end residential and commercial clients. My first big break came from a wealthy tech entrepreneur who was building a new home in the mountains. He was notoriously difficult, known for firing architects and designers mid-project. Everyone told me to stay away. I saw it as an opportunity. I listened to him. I understood what he wanted before he did. I didn't just design his house, I designed his life within it. He was thrilled. He became my biggest advocate, introducing me to his circle of equally wealthy, equally demanding friends. Within 2 years, Vance Designs was the most sought-after luxury design firm in Denver. I had a small, brilliant team. We had a waiting list. We were winning awards, real ones, earned through our own work. I was no longer struggling, I was thriving. That's when I met Garrett Sterling. He was a prominent real estate developer, a shark in a world of minnows. He was building a landmark luxury condominium tower in downtown Denver, and he was looking for a design firm for the lobby and penthouse suites. Our first meeting was in his office, overlooking the entire city. He was intense, brilliant, and didn't waste a single word. He grilled me for an hour, questioning every choice in my portfolio. He wasn't trying to intimidate me. He was testing me. And I met him at every point. I didn't just defend my work, I explained the business case behind every aesthetic choice. At the end of the meeting, he leaned back in his chair and just looked at me for a long moment. "You're the real deal, Vance," he said. And he gave me the contract. Working with Garrett was like playing tennis with a pro. He elevated my game. He was demanding, but he was fair. We challenged each other, we respected each other, and somewhere between blueprints and budget meetings, we fell in love. It was nothing like what I'd had with Theodore. This wasn't a relationship of convenience or potential. It was a partnership of equals, built on mutual admiration and a shared drive. A year later, we were married. I didn't take his name. I was Eleanor Vance, and I had built that name myself. Garrett, of all people, understood and respected that. Life was good. It was more than good, it was a life I had built from ashes. Occasionally, I'd hear whispers about my old life. An old acquaintance from Chicago would mention seeing Genevieve and Theodore at an event. The news was never good. Genevieve's career in finance had stalled after a series of bad investments. Theodore's sales numbers were down. I heard they had over-leveraged themselves to buy a huge house in the suburbs, desperate to keep up appearances. They were struggling. I felt a cold, distant satisfaction. It wasn't joy at their misfortune. It was the quiet affirmation that a foundation built on betrayal is destined to crumble. I was content to let them fade into a bad memory. Then, one evening, Garrett came home and tossed a thick binder onto our kitchen island. "Big news," he said. "We just got approval. The Sterling Group is officially expanding back to my hometown." I looked at the binder, at the bold letters spelling out the name of a city I had run from. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just a business opportunity. It was destiny. It was a chance to go back, not as a ghost, but as a queen. And I smiled. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." Returning to Chicago was surreal. The city was the same, but I was completely different. We bought a penthouse apartment with a sweeping view of the lakefront, the very skyline I used to stare at, dreaming of a future that had been stolen from me. Now, I owned a piece of it. Garrett was right. The Gold Coast Tower was the most ambitious project of his career, a shimmering skyscraper of glass and steel that would redefine the city's architecture. And Vance Designs was at the heart of it. We were designing everything from the grand lobby to the multi-million-dollar residences. My name, the one my mother thought was destined for mediocrity, was now attached to the most talked-about development in the city. About a month after we moved, Garrett and I were having dinner with the board of the Chicago Foundation. They were planning their annual charity ball and were looking for a high-profile host committee. They asked Garrett, as one of the city's newest and most influential players, to co-chair. He immediately turned to me. "Eleanor should do it," he said. "Vance Designs will co-host. It'll be a great way to announce our presence in the city." The board was ecstatic. And just like that, I was in charge of the most exclusive social event of the year. An idea began to form in my mind, a cold, intricate piece of architecture. This was my stage. Now, I just needed to get the right actors to play their parts. A few weeks later, Garrett came home from a long day of meetings, a look of annoyance on his face. "You will not believe the people who are crawling out of the woodwork for the tower project," he said, loosening his tie. "I had to sit through a presentation today from some desperate brother-sister team. The sister was some washed-up finance person, and her husband was a slick, cheap-suit salesman. Their proposal was a joke. Genevieve Vance and Theodore Sterling." I kept my face perfectly still. "Sterling?" I thought his name was different. "Apparently he changed it when they got married," Garrett said dismissively. "Anyway, I told my assistant to block their calls. We're not in the business of charity." It was almost too perfect. They were desperate. And they were reaching for the one thing in the city they couldn't have, not knowing it was controlled by the one person they had thrown away. The final pieces of my plan clicked into place. I spent the next 2 months meticulously planning the ball. I curated the guest list myself. It was a who's who of Chicago's elite, billionaire philanthropists, real estate moguls, bank presidents, and the city's most powerful investors. These were the people Genevieve and Theodore were dying to impress, the circles they had betrayed me to get into. Then, I made a special list. I found the addresses of a dozen of my parents' oldest and most gossipy friends. I made sure they received special, early invitations. The news would travel fast. They would hear that the legendary Garrett Sterling and his mysterious, successful wife were hosting the ball. They would hear the name Vance Designs. But they wouldn't put it all together. Not yet. The final step was the most important. I took a single sheet of the ball's official stationery, thick, cream-colored cardstock, embossed with a gold seal. I wrote out 3 names by hand: Mrs. Catherine Vance, Ms. Genevieve Vance, Mr. Theodore Sterling. I sealed the envelope myself. It wasn't an olive branch. It was bait. It was a summons. I pictured them receiving it, seeing the prestigious seal, feeling the weight of the paper. I pictured their greed and their social climbing ambition overriding any flicker of suspicion. They would see it as their golden ticket, their way back into the game. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. Pride was always their greatest weakness. And I was going to use it to orchestrate their final, public downfall. The night of the ball arrived, crisp and clear. I stood at the entrance to the grand hall, my arm linked through Garrett's, greeting our guests. I wore a gown of deep emerald green, the color of money and envy. With every handshake, every smile, I felt a deep, unshakable sense of calm. This was my room. My game. My rules. And then I saw them. My description from the start barely did it justice. The way my mother's eyes scanned the room, desperately seeking recognition. The way Genevieve's dress was just a little too flashy, a little too loud. And Theodore, in a suit that was trying too hard, a practiced, charming smile plastered on his face. When they finally reached the receiving line, there was a moment of beautiful, chaotic silence. Their smiles froze. My mother's hand flew to her chest. Genevieve's face went pale under her makeup. And Theodore just stared, his mouth slightly agape. I was the one who broke the silence. I smiled, a bright, welcoming, utterly merciless smile. Mother. Genevieve. What a surprise. I let my eyes drift to Theodore. And Theodore. It's been a long time. My mother recovered first, her social graces kicking in like a reflex. Eleanor, darling, she gushed, pulling me into a stiff, air-kiss embrace. We had no idea you were doing all of this. Why didn't you tell us? I've been busy, I said, pulling away gently. I turned to my husband. Garrett, you remember the story I told you about my family? This is them. Garrett, ever the gentleman, shook their hands, his expression polite but cool. A pleasure, he said, his voice leaving no room for doubt that it wasn't. They stumbled through the next few minutes, a flurry of awkward compliments and questions. They were trying to regain their footing, to understand the new landscape. They saw me not as their daughter or their sister, but as a connection, a gatekeeper. I let them squirm. I watched as they looked around the room, seeing the titans of industry and finance that Garrett and I greeted by name. I could see the frantic calculations happening behind their eyes. After we finished greeting guests, I let them be. I made my rounds, talking, laughing, networking. But I felt their eyes on me all night. A constant, burning stare from their corner table. Finally, as the live auction was about to begin, they made their move. They approached our table, where we were sitting with two of the biggest real estate investors in the Midwest. Eleanor, there you are, Genevieve said, her voice syrupy sweet. We were just saying, it's so wonderful to see you thriving. Thank you, Genevieve, I said, my voice even. Theodore stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Garrett. He ignored me completely. Mr. Sterling, Garrett, he began, his salesman's smile at full power. I know you're a busy man, but my wife and I have been trying to get a meeting with your team. We have a proposal for the retail partnership at the Gold Coast Tower that we know you'll find very compelling. Genevieve jumped in. Our financial models are airtight, and our projections are aggressive. We have a vision that could significantly increase the profitability of the ground floor space. They were performing, laying it on thick for the investors sitting right there. They were using my event, my platform, to pitch my husband, thinking I was just a silent, decorative wife. It was the most brazen, most insulting thing they could have done. And it was exactly what I had been counting on. I let them finish their breathless, desperate pitch. The investors looked on with mild interest. My mother watched with a proud, hungry gleam in her eye, as if her brilliant plan from 6 years ago was finally paying off. When they were done, a small silence fell over the table. Garrett didn't say a word. He just turned his head slowly, looked directly at me, and smiled. Well, darling, he asked, his voice carrying just enough for the whole table to hear. What do you think? You know their work better than anyone. Every head at the table turned to me. Genevieve's smile twitched. Theodore's confident posture faltered. My mother leaned forward, her eyes wide. The entire game, the entire night, the entire 6 years of pain and work and rage, all came down to this single moment. The queen was on the board. And it was her turn to move. I let the silence hang in the air for a moment longer, savoring it. I picked up my wine glass, swirled the deep red liquid, and took a slow, deliberate sip. Then, I placed it back on the table with a soft click and looked directly at the two investors sitting with us. I smiled, the same bright, merciless smile from before. "Actually, Mr. Davis, Mr. Chin, you'll find this interesting," I said, my voice calm and conversational. "My husband and I were just reviewing the final proposals for the tower's retail space this morning." I turned my head slightly, my eyes finally landing on Genevieve and Theodore. Their faces were tight with anticipation. "The board had a very specific set of criteria," I continued, my voice as smooth as silk. "We needed partners with impeccable financials, a history of stability, and most importantly, a truly original creative vision." I paused, letting the words sink in. I looked at Theodore. "And that's why your proposal was rejected." The silence that followed was sharp and absolute. It was as if all the air had been sucked out of our corner of the ballroom. Theodore's jaw literally dropped. Genevieve flinched as if I'd slapped her. I wasn't finished. I turned back to the investors. Unfortunately, their company has a reputation for being over-leveraged, and frankly, the proposal was uninspired. It lacked a certain integrity in its design. I let that last part hang in the air, a direct reference to the career they had built on my stolen work. One of the investors, Mr. Davis, a notoriously ruthless old man, looked from my face to Theodore's pale, sweaty one. He gave a short, sharp laugh. "Well, that settles that," he said, turning his back on them completely. The social execution was complete. My mother looked like she was going to be sick. "Eleanor," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "How could you? How could I?" I finally looked at her, letting the cold fury of 6 years into my eyes. "You orchestrated the end of my life as I knew it. You stood by and watched as they stole my future, my work, my happiness. You don't get to ask me that. Ever." They didn't say another word. They turned, a broken, humiliated trio, and practically fled from the table. For the rest of the night, they were ghosts. No one would speak to them. People would literally turn their backs as they approached. They left early, slipping out a side door like the thieves they were. The fallout was swift and brutal. The story of their public humiliation at the ball ripped through Chicago's business community. The two investors at our table made sure of that. Within a month, Genevieve's remaining backers pulled out. Her company, built on a foundation of lies, imploded. Theodore was fired from his job for the reputational damage. I heard through the grapevine that their spectacular divorce was even uglier than their marriage. They lost the big house in the suburbs. The last I heard, Genevieve was working as a mid-level consultant for a firm no one had ever heard of, and Theodore had moved out of state, chasing some other get-rich-quick scheme. They were erased. My mother tried to call me once. She left a voicemail, her voice brittle. "I don't understand what I did to deserve this," she'd cried. "Family is supposed to forgive." I deleted the message without a second thought. She hadn't wanted a family, she'd wanted a merger. And her investment had failed. Tonight, a year later, Garrett and I are standing on the balcony of our penthouse, looking out at the glittering Chicago skyline. In the distance, the new Gold Coast Tower is nearly complete, a shining beacon against the dark sky. It's my greatest professional achievement. A monument to the life I built, not from their ashes, but from my own. Garrett wraps his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he whispers. I look at the endless expanse of lights, at the city that once broke me and now felt like mine. I thought of the 3 people who were nothing more than a bad memory, 3 empty chairs at a table in my past. And for the first time, I felt nothing. No anger. No pain. Just peace. I lean back against him and smile. I was just thinking, I say, raising my glass to the city, that I'm finally home. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but I hope it found those who needed to hear it. What part of the story resonated with you the most? I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments below. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It truly means the world.